In the vast silence of the Pacific Ocean, beneath miles of crushing darkness, a secret dream took form. Not a dream of conquest, but of theft. A theft so daring, it could alter the balance of the world. In the fevered years of the Cold War, when every whisper could ignite catastrophe, a single Soviet submarine vanished beneath the waves, carrying nuclear missiles, secrets, and men who would never return. And in the shadows of Langley, a handful of Americans saw opportunity where others saw tragedy. They would build a machine that could reach the unreachable. They would lie to the world, deceive an empire, and risk everything, all to raise the dead from the bottom of the sea. They called it Project Azorian. And though the world laughed at the very idea, the laughter would not last. The year is 1970. The Cold War is at its peak, a tense standoff between two superpowers, the United States, confident in its technological edge, and the Soviet Union, determined to close the gap. Between them, the vast ocean becomes the new battlefield. Submarines, silent and invisible, carry the most powerful weapons known to man. Nuclear missiles capable of destroying entire cities with the push of a button. Each vessel waits for the signal to strike, its presence known only to those who control it. And then, one of these vessels, the Soviet K-129, simply disappears. Somewhere north of Hawaii, the submarine goes silent. No distress signal, no beacon. One moment it's there, the next it's gone. Moscow scrambles. Over 30 Soviet ships are sent to search vast stretches of ocean. The world is told it's a training exercise, but inside the Kremlin, panic sets in. The K-129 carried 3 nuclear warheads, each aimed at American cities. Now, they're lost. Weeks pass, then months. There's no wreckage, no survivors. For the Soviet Union, the loss is devastating. A blow to their pride too large to admit. For the CIA, however, it's an opportunity. If they could find the wreck first, if they could recover even a fragment of it, they might uncover valuable missile technology, secret communications, and nuclear firing systems. It's a spy's dream and a nation's nightmare if exposed. At CIA headquarters in Langley, a classified task force assembles. Their mission is deceptively simple: recover the Soviet submarine. But the logistics are beyond comprehension. The wreck lies 5 kilometers deep, far beyond the reach of any existing technology. Engineers and physicists say it's impossible. But the CIA presses forward, knowing that in the game of espionage, impossible only means classified funding. Within weeks, reconnaissance satellites confirm the wreck's location. The K-129 lies fractured and partially buried under silt, but still intact enough to tempt fate. The task force must ask, could they lift the submarine silently from the ocean floor without alerting the Soviets? There are no precedents, no blueprints, no examples, so the CIA decides to create their own. The plan: construct a massive ship disguised as a deep-sea mining vessel. Beneath it, a mechanical claw capable of descending 3 miles, gripping the submarine and raising it without detection. The challenge: how to build a ship this large, in complete secrecy. How to hide one of the most audacious engineering projects in history. The answer? Deception. To make it work, the CIA needs a cover, a name the world already believes in, and they find it in a recluse, Howard Hughes. Hughes, once a titan of American industry, has retreated from public life into isolation. His empire continues, operating through a web of companies and loyalists. To the CIA, he's the perfect mask. Through one of Hughes's subsidiaries, the CIA launches a front company. They announce a bold venture, deep-sea mining, a project to harvest valuable minerals from the ocean floor. The world buys into it. Economists hail it as the future of industry. Environmentalists barely understand it. And the Soviets? They don't suspect a thing. Behind the curtain, construction begins on the Hughes Glomar Explorer, a ship the size of a skyscraper, designed to lift a 6-million-pound submarine from the ocean's depths. The true purpose of the ship, the claws, the cables, the hydraulic systems, all are hidden behind a veil of corporate secrecy and national security. The workers building it are told nothing more than that they're constructing a mining platform. Some believe it. Others suspect something more. Only a few know the truth. In Langley, as reports from the construction site come in, CIA officials realize they may be on the verge of the most ambitious covert operation ever conceived. But even with the ship nearly complete, doubts linger. Some in the CIA mock it. Naval commanders are skeptical. Physicists question the ship's materials, and rumors swirl that the director himself may have gone mad. Still, by late 1971, the project is unstoppable. Every blueprint becomes steel. Every dream becomes noise. Cranes, welders, machinery pounding day and night. And beneath the waves, the K-129 lies in its dark grave, unaware that a massive ghost ship is being built to recover it, to steal it back from the sea. By 1971, the plan was in full swing. The Hughes Glomar Explorer was no longer just an idea. It was a secret ship being built in plain sight. To the public, it was a deep-sea mining operation. To the CIA, it was a covert mission to retrieve the unthinkable. A sunken Soviet submarine carrying nuclear missiles. In the shipyards of California, massive steel plates were welded together, each piece forming the most ambitious covert operation ever conceived. The ship was over 600 feet long, built to descend 3 miles into the ocean and recover a submarine. Its mechanical claw, Clementine, would be the key to the entire operation, capable of gripping the K-129 and raising it to the surface. Every part of the ship, every hydraulic system, every cable was engineered with a singular purpose: to retrieve the wreck without anyone knowing. Hughes's name would shield the project from public suspicion. The CIA worked closely with his company to ensure that the ship's true mission was hidden beneath layers of corporate secrecy. The workers on the project were told they were constructing a deep-sea mining vessel. Most believed it. Some had their doubts. Only a select few knew the truth. The ship was designed to recover a Soviet submarine buried in the depths of the Pacific. The K-129, armed with 3 nuclear warheads, lay trapped on the ocean floor. The CIA's mission was clear: recover it without alerting the Soviets, without leaving a trace. To accomplish this, the CIA needed a cover, a name that could never be questioned. And they found it in Howard Hughes. Hughes, once a symbol of American innovation, had retreated from public life. His empire, built on aviation, film, and real estate, continued under layers of companies and loyalists. To the CIA, he was the perfect front. No one would suspect that someone as eccentric as Hughes would be involved in espionage. His name would provide the perfect smokescreen for the operation. Through one of Hughes's companies, the CIA launched a front, a deep-sea mining venture to harvest precious minerals from the ocean floor. The project was framed as an industrial breakthrough, one that could change the future of resource extraction. Economists hailed it as visionary. Environmentalists barely understood it. The Soviets, watching from a distance, were puzzled but unconcerned. They believed the project was just another of Hughes's eccentricities. Behind closed doors, the Hughes Glomar Explorer began to take shape. The ship would cost more than $350 million, over $2 billion today, and would be capable of lifting a 6-million-pound submarine from the ocean floor. Every piece of the ship, every hydraulic system, every arm was designed with one goal: to retrieve the K-129 and keep the mission secret. The workers building the ship were given limited knowledge. They were told they were constructing a mining platform. Some believed it. Some had their doubts. But only a select few knew the truth. The true purpose of the ship was far more than mining. It was about recovering a Soviet submarine carrying nuclear missiles and vital intelligence. Construction of the ship continued at full speed. As Clementine, the massive claw, was being built, the CIA began to put their final plans into motion. They recruited a team of engineers, divers, naval officers, and intelligence agents to man the Glomar Explorer when it was ready. They were the ones who would take the ship into the deep Pacific and bring back the K-129. They would be the ones to descend into the abyss and retrieve the Soviet submarine from the ocean floor. But even as the ship neared completion, doubts persisted. Could it really work? Could they retrieve a submarine from the ocean's depths? And could they do it without the Soviets discovering the operation? By late 1971, the Hughes Glomar Explorer was nearly complete. The ship stood in the dock, its massive hull glistening in the sunlight, hiding its true purpose. The final tests were underway. Every piece of equipment was carefully inspected, every sensor calibrated. The ship had to be perfect. There was no room for error. At the same time, the CIA's planners were preparing to send the ship to sea. They knew the risks were enormous. If the operation failed, it would be catastrophic. But if it succeeded, it would be the greatest intelligence coup of the Cold War. The stakes were higher than ever. And so, the mission continued. The Glomar Explorer would be launched, its true purpose still hidden behind the guise of deep-sea mining. The world would believe it was just another strange venture from Howard Hughes. But beneath the surface, an operation of unparalleled audacity was about to begin. One that could change the course of the Cold War. The mission had begun. With the Hughes Glomar Explorer fully constructed, its purpose still hidden under the guise of a mining operation, the ship set sail for the northern Pacific, where the K-129 lay silently at the bottom of the ocean. The stakes were higher than ever. This was no longer a covert mission. This was a test of human ingenuity, technology, and sheer willpower. For months, the CIA had prepared for this moment. The team of engineers, divers, and intelligence officers selected to operate the Glomar Explorer had trained under extreme secrecy. Few outside of Langley knew the true purpose of their mission, and those who did were sworn to silence. To the world, they were a crew on a routine industrial venture. But below the surface, they were embarking on a mission of unparalleled risk. The journey to the wreck site took several weeks. As the Glomar Explorer sailed farther into the Pacific, the crew's tension grew palpable. Each day brought them closer to the deep ocean, where the K-129 lay buried under miles of crushing water pressure. The ship's enormous crane, Clementine, had been tested and retested, but no one knew how it would perform under the unimaginable pressure of the ocean's depths. As they neared the site, a sense of unease began to settle over the crew. Despite the massive size of the ship and its cutting-edge technology, the challenge ahead was almost too great to fathom. The wreck was located in one of the most treacherous regions of the Pacific, far from any known shipping lanes and in waters so deep that no human-made machine had ever descended to such depths. And yet, this was the mission they had been chosen for: to descend 3 miles, locate the wreck, and bring back a Soviet submarine carrying nuclear weapons. The day the operation began, the crew was on edge. The ship's hull creaked and groaned as it shifted into position over the wreck site. It was eerily silent as the Clementine lowered into the dark, cold waters. For the first time, the enormity of the task ahead settled into their bones. As the claw descended into the depths, the crew held their breath. Every movement had to be precise. One mistake could ruin the entire operation and expose the CIA's darkest secret. The sonar system painted a clear image of the wreck. The K-129 was there, larger than life, its dark form rising out of the ocean floor like an ancient ghost. The submarine was partially buried under silt, and its condition was worse than anticipated. But it was still there, and it was still valuable. Hours passed. The claw moved slowly, inching toward the wreck. Each centimeter was crucial, each second felt like a lifetime. The ship's crew worked in a near-perfect synchronized silence, aware that they were pushing the limits of technology, intelligence, and diplomacy. They were about to lift a foreign vessel from beneath the waves, and they had no idea how the Soviets would respond if they succeeded. The first attempt to grip the wreck failed. The claw clamped down, but the weight of the submarine proved too much. A shudder ran through the Glomar Explorer. Engineers in the control room frantically checked their monitors as the system struggled to maintain grip on the submarine. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the operation would fall apart right then and there. But the crew pressed on. The failure wasn't enough to stop them. The operation had been years in the making, and they were not about to give up now. After recalibrating the claw and the lifting mechanism, they attempted again. This time, they were successful. The Clementine wrapped its steel jaws around the K-129 with a crushing grip. A collective sigh of relief filled the control room. The submarine was in their grasp, but their relief was short-lived. They had the wreck, but the hardest part was still to come. Lifting the Soviet submarine from the ocean floor and transporting it to the surface without anyone noticing. As the claw lifted the wreck inch by inch, the crew felt the weight of the task ahead. They were lifting an entire submarine, a piece of Soviet military technology, from the ocean floor and hoping no one would notice. If the Soviets discovered their secret mission, it could lead to an international crisis. They had to get the wreck back to the surface without any interference. Hours passed. The submarine was slowly rising. But then came the next crisis. The weight of the wreck caused strain on the Glomar Explorer's mechanical systems. Cables snapped. Hydraulic systems whined under the pressure. The wreck was so heavy that the ship began to tilt as if the very ocean was resisting their effort. The crew fought to maintain control, trying to keep the ship steady as the K-129 was lifted ever closer to the surface. But just as the wreck neared the surface, disaster struck. The cable holding the wreck snapped. The K-129 plunged back into the depths, lost once again. The team had come so close. Their hopes had risen, only to be dashed in a moment. Silence fell over the control room as the crew processed the failure. They had recovered a portion of the wreck, but the rest, and the most important pieces, were lost to the depths of the Pacific. Yet the operation wasn't entirely in vain. The partial recovery contained valuable intelligence, including missiles and classified documents. It was a monumental achievement, but also a bitter reminder of how fragile the mission had been. With the wreck lost, the team faced their greatest challenge yet: the escape. The Glomar Explorer was not alone in the Pacific. The Soviets were already suspicious of the operation. If they were discovered, the consequences could be disastrous. The ship began its slow retreat, racing against time as Soviet ships began to close in. Every decision from here on out would determine whether this mission would remain a secret or spark an international crisis. The Glomar Explorer limped back to port, its mission complete, yet incomplete. The wreck of the K-129, or what was left of it, had been partially recovered. But the true prize, the Soviet submarine's most vital secrets, lay still buried deep in the Pacific. The operation was a success, but it was also a failure. The crew had risked everything, and they had lost as much as they gained. When the ship docked, the crew was silent. No one cheered. There were no congratulations. Instead, there was an eerie sense of relief mixed with disappointment. They had come so close to lifting the entire wreck. And yet, despite their best efforts, the mission had not gone entirely as planned. The wreck had fallen back into the ocean before it could be fully retrieved, leaving the world with only part of the K-129. But that partial recovery, that fragment of the submarine, was invaluable. Among the debris, the CIA had recovered missile technology, launch codes, and critical intelligence that would change the course of the Cold War. The operation had been risky, but it had paid off in ways no one had anticipated. As the Glomar Explorer returned to port, the crew was forced to remain silent about the true nature of the mission. They were bound by secrecy, their names erased from history. The public would never know the real story behind the operation. The CIA's victory would remain hidden in the shadows, buried under layers of classified documents. The mission had achieved something far more significant than just recovering a piece of Soviet military equipment. It had shown the world, and the Soviet Union, that no one was safe. Even their most precious secrets could be stolen from the deepest depths of the ocean. But the world would never know how close the United States had come to an international incident. The CIA's operation was one of the most audacious covert missions ever attempted, yet no one outside of intelligence circles would ever fully understand the risks, the sacrifices, and the dangers that had been faced. Years would pass before the full details of Project Azorian were uncovered. Journalists, intrigued by rumors of a secret mission, would eventually piece together the story of the Glomar Explorer and its crew. But the full truth would remain hidden, locked away in classified files, out of reach of the public for decades. the CIA would never confirm the mission, using the now legendary Glomar response. We can neither confirm nor deny. The operation's aftermath was bittersweet. For the CIA, it was a victory, but also a reminder of the high cost of secrecy. The men who had risked their lives in the depths of the ocean returned home without fanfare, their names erased from history. They had succeeded, but they could never tell anyone the story of what they had done. For the Soviets, the loss of the K-129 and its valuable intelligence was a blow they would never admit. They were forced to cover up the truth, pretending that the submarine had simply been lost at sea. The world would never know how close they had come to losing a major piece of military technology. In the end, Project Azorian achieved something even more significant than the recovery of a Soviet submarine. It demonstrated the lengths to which the United States was willing to go to win the Cold War. It showed that espionage, when executed with precision and secrecy, could change the course of history. The mission's legacy would live on in the shadows. The Hughes Glomar Explorer would become a symbol of American ingenuity and audacity. Its name would be whispered in intelligence circles as one of the greatest covert operations of all time. And though the world would never know the full story, the men who sailed aboard that ship knew one thing for certain. They had made history. The impossible had been achieved. And in the silence of the deep Pacific, the Cold War's balance of power had shifted, even if no one would ever truly understand how. The Hughes Glomar Explorer docked, its mission both a triumph and a haunting reminder of the price of secrecy. The wreck of the K-129 had been lifted, partially recovered, but the full glory of the operation, the prized intelligence, remained buried in the ocean's depths. For the men who had sailed the Glomar Explorer, the mission would remain a silent victory. In the years that followed, the world would move on. The Cold War raged on, shifting and changing, but the story of the Glomar Explorer and Project Azorian remained hidden in the shadows. The CIA, as always, kept its secrets locked away, and those who had participated in the operation were sworn to silence. Their names, their stories, erased. The world would never know the full extent of what had been achieved. The mission was, in many ways, a ghost story. A covert operation that had shifted the balance of power in the Cold War, but had left no trace of its existence in the public eye. In Langley, behind the thick walls of secrecy, the CIA celebrated its victory. Yet, the triumph was bittersweet. The operation had cost more than just money. It had cost the lives of men who would never be remembered as heroes. The K-129 had been recovered, yes, but at a cost. The failure to retrieve the submarine in its entirety meant that the most valuable intelligence had been lost. The crew of the Glomar Explorer had come so close to pulling off the impossible. And yet, they had failed to fully recover what they had set out to find. For the CIA, the success was a quiet one. Project Azorian would go down in history as one of the greatest covert operations ever undertaken, a stunning feat of espionage and ingenuity. But it would also be a reminder of the dangers of secrecy. The mission's success was achieved under layers of deception, and at the expense of human lives, both in the depths of the ocean and in the corridors of power. The men who had worked on the operation were never fully acknowledged. They returned to their lives, carrying the burden of a secret too heavy to share. They were heroes without a cause, soldiers without a war. They had done something that no one would ever truly understand, and they would carry the weight of that knowledge for the rest of their lives. In the years that followed, the world would slowly start to learn bits and pieces of the truth. Journalists, intrigued by whispers of the Glomar explorer, began to dig. They pieced together fragments of the story, slowly unearthing the tale of the CIA's most audacious operation. But even as the truth emerged, it remained shrouded in mystery, a story that would never be fully told. The Glomar response, the phrase coined by the CIA to deny any knowledge of the operation, became a symbol of the agency's secrecy. It would be used in countless situations in the decades that followed, a simple but powerful tool to keep the public in the dark about the covert operations the CIA conducted. The legacy of Project Azorian lived on, but only in the whispered corners of history. But for those who had sailed aboard the Glomar explorer, the legacy was more personal. They had taken part in a mission that had shifted the course of history. Yet no one would ever truly know. They had defied the impossible, stolen secrets from the ocean's depths, and changed the game of espionage forever. And yet, their names would never be spoken. In the end, Project Azorian wasn't just a victory in the Cold War. It was a testament to the lengths to which nations would go to protect their secrets. It was a story of men who risked everything, not for glory, but for the cold, hard truths of a world that thrived in darkness. The Hughes Glomar explorer would go down in history, not just as a ship that lifted a Soviet submarine from the depths, but as a symbol of a silent, secret war, fought beneath the waves and beyond the reach of public knowledge. The CIA won the Cold War in its own way, one operation at a time. But as the men who participated in Project Azorian faded into history, their victory remained unsung, buried in the deep. The world may never fully understand the sacrifices made, the risks taken, and the lives lost in the pursuit of secrecy. But in the shadows of the Cold War, Project Azorian remains one of the greatest untold stories of espionage ever written.